Hey there, everybody. I just wanted to make a video about the underlying cause of Donald Trump's election here in the United States, the Brexit, the supposed Frexit, and Marie Le Pen's probability that she's going to be elected, the Italian exit from the European Union. And I want to try and help you understand why the EU is failing and why there was a major shift. Not, all the corruption and warmongering and everything aside of Hillary Clinton, which made her so terrible, was her incestuous relationship with the big banks. And what I want to point out is these political movements are an unconscious awakening of the public in these areas. It's a rebellion against our monetary system, which is broken hopelessly and beyond repair. And I'll tell you why. For a long time now, well, let me start with a bit of history. It used to be, back in the 1800s, 1840s, you would have these heavy metal coins, and that's what you would carry around to barter with. Your money was physical, it was gold or silver. You held it in your hand. Well, it became difficult to carry all this change around, so banks began to issue paper currency, like checks or whatever, showed that it was just as good as the physical money, and so people knew that the money was in the bank, and it was a lot easier. So the banks started to create these paper currencies, which were traded larger than the physical currencies. And that's why I wanted to say, the physical currency, because it was heavy, because it was cumbersome, allowed this, paper system to be created. Well, there was no oversight in how the paper money was created. It was just a matter of convenience. And the banks found it immensely more profitable to use these paper bills instead of actually using the precious metals or the change. And so did the governments. The government also said, well, the Treasury Department doesn't have to pay, X amount to create a penny, to create a nickel, a dime, so on and so forth. So it's easier for us to use this paper currency. And they wrangled that in. That was brought to heel in Europe. And the regulations made it impossible for the banks to create this money out of thin air. Well, now technology has increased to the point where nobody carries around paper money anymore. We've moved to a more cashless society. So essentially, money is just numbers on a computer screen. Well, the banks, again, have regulation is not caught up with the bank's ability to create this money out of thin air. Everybody thinks, okay, well, how a bank works, and this is not true, but this is just how a poll was conducted. And most people think, okay, when I go into borrow money from a bank, I'm essentially borrowing money from some old pensioner's deposit, and the bank is lending me a portion of their money, and then I go in and buy a house, and the bank makes a little interest off of it if they have good loans, and then the pensioner gets paid a small percentage of interest on her account. But that, in fact, is not true. That's how it works for you and your household. You save money and you live within your means, and you scrimp and save. you have more. But what people don't understand is banks have the unlimited ability to print, or not print money, but to create money on a computer screen. They literally can issue as much credit as they'd like to. And they issue this credit and they sell it to the government. They lend it to you. So anytime you go out and work and you make a dollar, that dollar, somebody else owes interest on that dollar, because the banks loan it out, they loan it into creation, and whoever borrowed it has to pay the interest on it. So every piece of money that is in circulation has some amount of debt attached to it. So it's always going to create a situation where your society is always going to be in debt, and they're going to be in debt to a higher degree as the system goes on and on and on. So it means that monetary systems in the EU and in the United States are hopelessly broken beyond repair. And and the banks, when they create this money out of thin air, and they allocate it to things that the bank wants to do, and it's not used for any social benefit or any social welfare. It's very interesting or bizarre to me, where people clamor for healthcare, they clamor for social services, and with the technologies being what they are and people's level of education, all that can easily be done if you're just creating money out of thin air. But instead, it's allocated to what the banking cabals want it to be allocated to, whether that's ultra high inflation and asset bubbles, and that's the thing that makes it impossible to buy a house, because the asset bubble for the housing market is overinflated, and housing prices are overinflated by 60%. So it makes, for people of my generation, to go out and buy a house, it's insane, even though the interest rates are low, because we're paying 60% over value. And then we have to take a 30-year banknote and pay interest to the bank on. And essentially, it makes it so the bank always owns everything. The banks essentially become so powerful, they own everything. When you talk about a bailout or whatever, if the banks fail, it's not really your money. It's not really taxpayer money, because they printed that out of thin air. They transferred it to the government in the form of IOU, and then it was transferred back to the banks again. So it wasn't really like the taxpayers bailed out anything. It's a big illusion. Like the entire monetary system is a big illusion. And it was very interesting. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine at the Forge. And I said, man, if because there's such highly talented people and they can produce and they create real works and speculate, I was like, I wish we could just, produce some coins or something, or give people a pen, that goes around and say, I'm producing something, and then trade that for things of equal value. It's like, if you go and put in 8, hard hours, 10, 12 hard hours producing something, you have something to show for it. You've contributed something that actually physically changes the world, which is work. And then you want to say, since I worked, I created something, I would like to have something, in return. So, okay, like I reason it, I made X amount of dollars, at the Forge, and this is how hard my labor is, and this is how valuable the art is to the world. I'll take that into consideration. I say, well, now I need to see a doctor. Okay, so I'll only make X amount of dollars per hour. The doctor makes more, and I decide to pay him more because of the education, the time, and the training. I pay him for his advice. So I'm willing to pay more for his service because while bronzesmithing is a very, very ancient and high art, it's not, you know, a lifetime of consistently training, you know, in medical and what you're willing to pay for a doctor's advice is different, or to go in to have a surgery or something. These are highly specialized skills that most people are not capable of. So, anytime you really want an economy to function, you want an economy to function on its ability to valuate or have proper valuations for things. And what has happened is, since banks can not only create money, they can also invest money, because the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, they can inflate or deflate. In fact, there was $80 billion of paper gold contracts issued on the COMEX to drive gold prices down. And that's what keeps gold prices artificially low. And I don't really believe in holding precious metals as a currency anyway, because of the same reason they got rid of it in the 1800s and the same reason we use numbers today. It's very highly inconvenient to try to transact anything in heavy bars of gold. It's insane. You need to, you know, use the gold for art or use the silver for art, so you're creating great works. So if you ever want to normalize your economies, you have to move to a different sort of digital economy. And this is what I study. And something like Bitcoin or Ethereum, where you're working with a one-to-one system and a peer-to-peer transfer, and there can only be a certain amount that's in circulation. The more Bitcoin miners that come onto the system make it harder to compromise the security of the system. And essentially, a Bitcoin farm works like this. You've got a number of processors, and they're set all day, 24 hours a day, to search for this random number that's in this algorithm that gets harder and harder as more Bitcoin miners come onto the system, because not only is the processor contributing to the difficulty of the random number being discovered, so therefore it decreases the chances of somebody hitting it, and when they hit it, it creates a Bitcoin. So that's why you can only have a finite number, a supply number in the system. And anytime you transact specifically peer-to-peer. So I would trade somebody directly my Bitcoin for their, and specifically, for their service. So there's no way to, it's not being created out of thin air. There's no way to compromise the security of it, like the banks are. Security is laughably and easily compromised. Nothing is created on credit. It's all, real money. But what's going to happen is, most people don't understand that it's just incomprehensible for them to think that banks can just create money out of thin air. Like, my money really isn't worth anything. Like, it really, all of a sudden, it could be a rude awakening, and I think that's what's going to happen. There's going to be so many, with asset bubbles and things, there's going to be already so many people can't afford to pay their debts. I've never bought anything on credit in my entire life. In fact, I left VCU. My father was paying for a third of my education. My mother was paying for a third of education. And I was too when I was working. I was stealing books. I was doing everything I could to make ends meet. I was living at my grandparents' house. And class sizes were huge. I was seeing upperclassmen graduate, not getting good jobs, and it came to the point where they wanted me to borrow money to continue my education. I said, at that point, I said, this is ludicrous. Absolutely no way, not a chance. So I left and I went to work, and that was a good decision. I see people leaving higher education now, easily $160,000 in debt. I know an art history major who, quite frankly, is a brilliant guy, and he went to Ringling, $160,000 in debt. So what can he buy now? He works for the Forge, and like I said, the breadth and depth of his knowledge is incredible. But he's not going to be able to make that money to be able to repay that, then to go on to feed the economy by buying a house and maybe buying art or any of these other things. All our society is doing right now is rewarding speculative behavior. And there are ways to make obscene amounts of cash. I'll get into that in another video. And that's essentially holding positions on the stock market and then shorting other things. It's options trading, and you can make obscene amounts of cash. Gregory Manarino's got a video out there where he's going step by step with it, and he turned, I think, a $3,000 deposit into like $8,000 in 1 month or something, just by holding a couple of trades and getting rid of them. He's got something called the evolution system if you're interested in checking out how he uses that to work. But I know that the backlash is going to come because it will ultimately reach a point, and it has in Europe and it is in the United States. Even though people don't understand, it's reached a point where I can't afford these things. This is not all just due to NAFTA. This is not all just due to free trade. This is not all due just to your manufacturing jobs going overseas. That's a big part of it, the loss of production. But if you understand the banking system being at the top of that, being one of the major problems, yes, you do need to bring manufacturing back and all that type of stuff, but that does not heal the economy. That simply allows perpetuation of this imaginary system. So fundamentally, people need to start thinking about moving into digital cryptocurrencies, which governments cannot interfere with, banks cannot interfere with. It's if you earn the money is yours, and that's the way it should be. Nobody else has a right to your money. The banks don't have a right to your labor. The government doesn't have a right to your labor. Nobody has a right to your labor but you. And if you decide, if you're going to live within a country, and you need to pay your taxes and do all that stuff, and it's going to make a very big impact on public policy when people actually, people think that they see their money going away in their paycheck with these deductions for Social Security and so on and so forth. Again, it's a total mind fuck on you to help you to really confuse what's going on. So, if you're going to print money out of thin air, why not, just have your health care and all that type of stuff. Now, that too is a major issue. You're moving along the lines of communism at that point. And that's essentially where we're moving now with the banks, is this communism, where everything's owned by the oligarchs and the government. All the systems of free trade. It's the death of capitalism. This is what people don't understand. Capitalism is dying right before our eyes. And personally, I love the capitalist system because I believe in somebody's right to self-determination. And with that, I also believe that all men are, uh, you know, are entitled to the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And you know, if we can reform these corrupt monetary systems, we can enable other people to have opportunities that they wouldn't have. We bring these jobs back. We can enable people that haven't or that have been marginalized in our society. And right now, it just seems like everybody's being marginalized in our society except for a specific class, the banker class or the professional class. And yeah, the game is rigged, but it's rigged in a way that things are not being produced. And that is going to be the death of society. You look around, you don't see monuments, you don't see things that have been attributed to societies long older than ours. You know, the Greeks created some fantastic work. The Egyptians could do it. And look around you, you're living in a cultural wasteland. And it's time for a true renaissance. And I think it can be accomplished with a grassroots movement. And I'm going to keep my eye on the ball. I'm going to keep my eye on in these cryptocurrencies. You have to, for me, it's not as much of a problem because I can withstand volatility. Because I'm young, I can withstand the swings that are in the value of Bitcoin. But we also have these nasty players in the banking system that will often manipulate the price of Bitcoin by buying in cash what they can print. So, you know, you see that manipulated just as much as the gold market. That's why we see these big crashes, and everybody can do this fear-mongering campaign about, you know, oh, it's, you know, it's not reliable, and so on and so forth. It's because of some of the manipulations that are going on out there. Also, I just wanted to add here, if you stuck with me this long, I wanted to thank everybody for the birthday presents and the cards. Very much appreciated. I love you all. It's fantastic. I've managed to save a bit back for it, and, you know, buy a new tire, and I don't think I've spent anything else actually. Come to think of it, yeah, I'm stingy like that because I don't buy anything on credit. So I'll get a new tire probably before I come up to Virginia. So again, I wanted to thank everybody for that very much. And you guys have a great night, and I will catch you later.